Hi everyone. So today I am speaking with the one and only Dr. Ajohche. Um, we've been friends for quite a while now. I think for over 10 years we've known each other.
Mm.
Coming from Cameroon to study um, in South Africa, the University of the Western Cape, and you studied linguistics. Um, Maybe just walk us through your journey, right, from your country to South Africa. Why South Africa? Why University of the Western Cape? And maybe through your journey, why actually the particular study? Why study linguistics? Yeah, let's start from there.
Into that. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kenny, for having me, fellow doctor. um, thank you so much for having me on your platform. I'm looking forward to a great conversation. But in terms of where my journey started from, I left Cameroon. I actually started my university in Dubai, which is not something that I talk about too much because my dad at the time had a contract in Dubai and he wanted me to start with him. But life happens as it does, and for some reason, we couldn't continue to live there. And so he figured he would want me to continue with that standard of education. And so we started to look at least tertiary education. So we started to look elsewhere to see where, because he couldn't leave me in Dubai, and he figured I needed to start thinking of an alternative. So we looked everywhere, America, but at the end of the day, you will cut your coat according to your material, not according to your size. Because sometimes your size is bigger than the fabric you have. So so we had to make the choice that was the most financially reasonable choice, number one. And number two, I had an uncle who was at the University of the Western Cape, my mom's younger brother. So he had been doing his master's here at the time. And he told us that it was not too expensive and I could get a part-time job, sold it very well. So my dad was like, okay, we have family over there. It's not breaking the bank. Let's go. So that's how I ended up in South Africa and specifically the University of the Western Cape. Because if you know anything about the way it works, UWC is one of the only universities in South Africa that doesn't charge an international student's fee. So even if you're an international student, if you're from Africa, you pay the same as a national or local student, except that it's
Yeah.
expected that you pay upfront, which I never did, not once in my life, because there was no money to be paying fees upfront. But UWC is that kind of institution that leaves room, it allows space for that. So
Yeah.
that's why UWC has been my home for the longest time. I've done my undergraduate, postgrad, PhD, everything at UWC. There are reasons beyond that I can't get into in this video, but a bunch of life
Hmm.
things happened, and then I ended up staying here for most of my degree. So then, why linguistics? um, I was studying public relations when I started in Dubai. That was my major. So looking for something closely related to that.
Hmm.
Language and communication in the undergraduate's booklet was the closest thing that I
Hmm.
could find to public relations.
Yeah.
So I started with that, but it's called language and communication in undergrad, but the department is the linguistics department. And as you go
Oh,
into the postgrad, it shifts from
yeah.
language and communication to linguistics, right? So that's how I found myself there. I majored in language and communication and industrial psychology, but I found industrial psychology incredibly, it did not do much for my brain. Let's just say that it wasn't the most inspiring thing. I learned some cool things about psychology. The psychology aspect is what I was interested in. And then my African father asked me, "What are you going to do with psychology and linguistics in Africa?" So I figured, let me add, let me add industrial in front of it, and maybe it sounds more employable. And so what I enjoyed
What?
was the psychology aspect and not so much the industrial aspect. And so when it came to choose between language, society, those kinds of things, and HR, labor relations, yeah, I went the language route. I went the language route. It wasn't a
Wow.
difficult decision.
You
Yeah.
know, Dr. Ajohche, as you were talking, sharing your story, actually, it just dawned on me how UWC was played a very important role in the lives of many of us, right?
Yes.
Very similar story as to yours. What actually motivated me to apply to that school was the fact that I read somewhere on the website that if you're an African, you pay the same fee as the South Africans. I was like, oh, so it's just similar. In my mind, I was like, so it's just like in Nigeria, studying in Nigeria. So
Yes.
let me try it, right? But also how that university provided a succor for even South Africans from impoverished background, right? In which case I would argue that some of them probably would not have been able to survive that transition if they were not at UWC, because UWC has really serious programs like the mentorship program, but they really understand the circumstances of disadvantaged position. And of course, that's the history of the university, and they wanted to actually play an important role in bringing that shift in the South African educational system. So I think the university did a lot of work. Recently, my friend was telling me he studied some. Okay, you know If now, so he
Yes,
was
yes,
telling me
yes,
that
yes.
he he sometimes he began to think about how their first year the first year was for them. A lot of South Africans that came, like some of them couldn't even speak, express themselves. They were struggling to understand the environment. But now some of them are like very big pharmacists, like making a lot of money.
Yes,
WC played a role in that. I,
it
I think it,
does.
yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah.
it
I
took us from
I
where
feel
we
that
are.
same way. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I wanted to say it took us from where we are, considering the constraints of our circumstances, and it was able to nurture us into who we are today. So I think we need to say kudos to UWC.
UWC. I say it everywhere I go. I am very protective of UWC. They don't know it, but I am very protective of this institution because I don't think I would have managed to get here if it wasn't for that space that they allow in their program for the human
Yeah,
aspect to come through,
mm,
because
absolutely.
they tell you when you register that you have to pay the fee upfront. But I knew that if I went to those offices and cried in front of three people, someone is going to eventually, someone is eventually going to clear me. And those things that I mentioned, I couldn't actually get into the video is more of those reasons why UWC has a
Yeah,
very close place to my heart.
absolutely.
And I
Uh,
they were maybe the first institution to create a writing center because they acknowledge this difficulty with the
yeah,
students, the background they come
yeah,
from. And I
yeah,
think more than many institutions in this country, they actually try to embody, what they started out trying to do, which was really
ab-
being there for these people that were left out of the apartheid,
yeah,
system. So I value them because they say it almost as if it's a PR thing, but I have lived it and experienced it. So
absolutely.
I would, and you get a similar quality of education as any of the other ones, just without
Yeah,
paying exorbitant prices.
without breaking your bank. And that
Yes.
actually brings me to the second question that I have for you. You know, the changing dynamics in terms of education, right? Um, um, Getting quality education these days is very expensive, right? Um, Now, how would you say that your program actually prepared you for the world of work, right? How to what extent would you attribute where you are to actually the structure of the program itself, and maybe extending that beyond the confines of the academic world? Do you think that the program actually prepares people to actually go out there into the non-academic industries and do well?
I think to answer that question, sometimes we have to look at what the goal of the department is, what their focus or orientation is. So
Mm,
for my department specifically, we are more of a theoretical. Yeah, we're more at the theory level and trying to understand language and how language works within
mm,
society and whatnot at a theoretical level. There are those
yeah.
who do applied linguistics who then take that into the practicalities of it. How do we use this in
Mm,
teaching language? How do we use this to facilitate communication and whatnot and whatnot? But in terms of skills, it's more so an ability to think critically, to analyze text, to make sense of different types of perspectives and opinions and come to your own sort of voice. So in
mm,
that sense, it's very much a humanities, social science type of discipline, but again
mm.
on a theoretical. We
Yeah.
linguistics, but if you ask me what my discipline is, it's actually more so sociolinguistics. So I'm interested in language, but language within its social uses, right, and how it works within the
Oh,
social world. So it's very interdisciplinary in that sense that we have some media, we have some communication studies, we have some functional grammar, and all of these different aspects of the linguistics discipline that comes into play. Now, how does this prepare a student for the world of work? Is where you have to do a bit of promotion. You have to market it a bit because when you just
yeah.
hear it as linguistics, when I say I do linguistics, someone says, "How many languages do you speak?" And I'm always just embarrassed because I speak English and maybe a bit of pidgin and a bit of this, but that's not the kind of linguistics that I do. And I always don't know how to disappoint someone who was expecting to hear some
Yeah.
fancy number.
Yeah.
So I tell my students, because a lot of our students, I did curriculum advising, so to advise students on why to study linguistics or anthropology or whatever. And what I would tell most of the students who came into that discipline is that this linguistics, language and communication, provides a foundation that you will need regardless of where you end up in your life of work. Because if there's one thing
Mm,
you need to know is how to communicate, and not just communicate effectively, but communicate in the world we live in across different types of people, different cultures, different perspectives.
mm.
If you are going to represent yourself in the world of work, how do you best communicate what you offer, what your skills are? If you are working for a company, and you form part of their communications element, how do you bring in all that theoretical knowledge that you've gathered about how communication works into these practicalities, right? So we have some practical things in our curriculum where we're looking at, how advertisements are put together. The students sort of work with adverts, they try and create their own and analyze, the writing skills, the literacy skills. These are all things that you then eventually must use in the workplace. But what I do tell students is that if you're going to take a field like language and communication studies, which is very broad and very interdisciplinary in terms of where you can possibly use the information, it really comes down to the student to figure out, how do I use this? Where am I trying to go in my career? And how can the knowledge I'm gaining from this discipline help me be favorably positioned in
Mm.
the job market? I like to tell my students that sometimes it's not about looking really at a job, and more so at a career, at the things you enjoy doing. If you enjoy writing, if you enjoy speaking, doing things with your hands, how can you, a good ability to communicate, a good understanding of communication, of language, how can it feed into all of these things? So the immediate places that I would think about that our program helps people, prepares students for, is that whatever role you then occupy, you can apply your critical thinking, you can apply your analytical skills and those kinds of things to help make decisions. It helps you think creatively. It helps you think, what other perspectives can I bring into this conversation? What aspect of communication are they not considering? But obviously,
Mm.
on the CV, it's not always so straightforward. It's not like marketing or advertising or a business degree. So it takes a little
Yeah.
bit more work to put it together in something tangible. So I would usually tell my students to pair this with something else that they thing that they would enjoy to do. So if it's industrial psychology or psychology, some of them want to be teachers, some of them want to be in media and marketing, some of them want to go into social media. So all of these kinds of disciplines, journalism, anything that involves an ability to think, write, and speak clearly and eloquently, this helps you get the theoretical foundation to do
Mm.
those things. So in that sense, I think more than anything, the problem in our society is a thinking problem. That's what I think. I think it's a thinking problem. We need to be, and we're going to get into the whole technology part of things, but it's the people who can think creatively outside the box, who can draw from several different sources, that are going to
Yeah.
eventually excel, regardless of what their primary skills, are. And that's my take. So
Wow.
like anything, depending on what, yeah, basically.
I
Basically.
think people should make you their PR for the linguistics. You actually, in all honesty, like you've actually educated me on actually what the potential in that particular degree, right? Because I also felt that way when I have quite, of course, I have quite few friends in the like linguistics. I just appear to be nice, but okay, well, yeah, those kind of things. Um, but in essence, I think what you're trying to say is this: this is actually should be a foundational degree for most people, right? Social linguistics. You need to
Yes.
be able to understand context, the social context you are, and how to engage in that, which is practically all jobs, right? That's you
Yeah.
can call it soft skills, right? It's
Yeah,
practically
soft
all.
skills, basically.
Yeah. How do you see that in terms of the impact of technology and how our continent, Africa, can actually navigate that, either utilize that to actually for its own advantage?
These are very difficult questions. I don't even know I have authority to be speaking on them.
Well,
um,
you are an educator, right? You are an educator. You're almost like producing graduates. Let me use the word. So you understand the role you are playing in shaping the future of the labor market in Africa. So you could just speak from that
from
dimension.
that
You don't have to go.
perspective,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know, the way I see it, especially if I bring it to the very, very local context of the university and these technologies and just the trends, the global trends in things, I would actually say that we sometimes think of this being the third world country according to criteria that is not actually ours, if that makes sense. So when we decide what is a developed versus a underdeveloped country, there's a very specific criteria that we are using to discuss these things. And for me,
yeah,
because I've tried to work a lot with a decolonial framework, with a decolonial sensitivity to things. When I
yeah,
see this and what might be perceived as a lack, I
mm,
think might be an opportunity for the university in Africa, the academic institutions, to find an alternative direction from where we see the West going, right? It's a very ambitious thing that I'm saying, and
mm,
I don't, if you ask me the specifics of it, I don't yet know, but this is my dream, my vision for what I think Africa could be, what the opportunity really
yeah,
is in Africa. For me, it's
yeah,
still at the point of being able to define our values in a way
yeah,
that doesn't take us down those same
yeah,
traps that we are now
yeah,
currently seeing. So what does it
yeah,
mean to have, so if we say that we don't have access to technology in Africa within our context, we have to actually ask ourselves, is the technology the solution to our problem? Or is
mm,
it other things? Are there other things we can do around before the technology that can help us get there? Because there is this tendency to think that it's a new thing that has come from new stuff that's going to finally propel us. But like I was telling you earlier, the biggest problem I think is still a problem of here. And it's a
yes, yeah,
problem that AI unfortunately cannot help us with in terms of
yeah,
how we think about the world and how we think about our role within it. So, what Africa would do in the time of AI, what African institutions would do during this time of uncertainty and changing, things are moving very, very much in flux, is think about when these things finally settle, if they do, where would we want it to congeal? Like, do we want it to be heading towards the place of unsustainable business strategies, overproduction, overconsumption? Those kinds of things we can already tell from here are not sustainable. Or are we going to try and inculcate different values into our students, into our people, so that we're not just thinking about how we can cut down trees and build big infrastructures, but we are thinking about we can rebuild that relationship with nature that we once had that used to keep us just fine, right? We could the African spirituality was very much in line with nature. And I feel like when you respect the world around you, whether it's animals or things or rivers or trees, there's something about the humanity of the people that you can see. It's not to say that those traditional African cultures were perfect, but the rate of destruction, the rate at which we are just extracting and extracting, we just can't be satisfied.
mm,
So the current solutions on the table that point us towards technological solutions, more production. I don't know that that's necessarily the only
wow.
way we could be going.
Yeah.
It's certainly an aspect of a potential solution for Africa, but more so, we need to think about the if we say we have transformed the world and Africa has jumped into another state, what would that state look like? What is it? Is it the skyscrapers in New York, Manhattan? Is that what defines development and success? Is it
Yeah.
working six jobs and not being able to find a life for yourself, even though you work so hard? Is it, glorifying material things, just accumulation and accumulation and accumulation? Is that really where we want to drive our society? Is that the definitions of success and a development or development that we want to take with us into the future? I feel those are
Wow.
the conversations that we have, and then they trickle down into the details of how we execute things. Because if our ideology, if our philosophy is right, because the world as we know now comes from liberalism, right? A lot of it is from John Locke and his thoughts, or Karl
Yeah.
Marx and his thoughts. And so
Yeah.
what we need in Africa, I think, is people that can think outside of what is, who can imagine a world beyond the limitations of colonialism, neo-colonialism, and all the problems that we keep studying and going around in circles but can't seem to escape. So it's going to take more than just figuring out technology, because if you think about it, technology, most of it we don't produce. It's
Yes.
something we must now import. And if we're importing it, we know it comes with a lot of things from elsewhere. It doesn't come for free. There are conditions for certain relationships that you must have to be able to. And I don't know that that is necessarily where Africa should be going.
Wow.
You see, so that's my take, and I feel at that point you're moving the conversation beyond small strategies to big picture thinking. Like, okay, where are we going? And is this technology actually the right way to go? Are there other ways of thinking? Can we tap back into how we used to do things and maybe pull from that and mix a mixture of things that works for us, and then equip our young people to gain pride in that, and then work to develop and
Mm,
maintain it.
mm,
But if we
mm.
keep chasing what is development by the West, by China, by
Yeah.
everybody, then we are always behind, because we're always playing someone else's game. They've been doing
Absolutely.
this for hundreds of years. We stand no
Yeah.
chance.
You almost like you are playing a catch up because you observe to see what they are doing, then you run after them. By the time you are getting there, they've
It's
upgraded, you
old.
continue to run. So you keep chasing. This is actually
Yeah.
a very important topic that you brought up. The issue of Africa defining its own developmental objectives, even in the context of the emerging technology that we see. Because when we articulated what what development means for us, we can now think through how we can leverage the technology to achieve it in our
Yes.
own within our own space. Um, I find it fascinating. First is the fact that if Africa, for example, a lot of people talk about how technology could help to lead to overproduction, prosperity in terms of production of food and everything. But the problem we've actually had in Africa is not just about production, it's about distribution, right? So, what's the point of overproducing when it's still controlled by the few, right? Who decides who gets access to that, right? Of course, even in our political system, that's one of our challenges where you have this elite political class that holds power and they almost claim that it as it's their inheritance and
Yeah.
they don't access. And because they don't allow access, there's no diffusion of ideas, there's no new ideas on how to do things. So we actually having I think it's and probably universities could play an important role in that. Let's actually engage, right? Let's engage with one another and see if we can arrive at what development should look like, right? Even if it's at a broad level, then we'll figure a way to actually narrow it down in the to the tactical level. But what are we aiming for on the continent of Africa? We currently have 50% of our young over 50% of the world's out of school children are in Africa, more than 50%. And Africa is not even up to the population of India, it's not up to the population of China, and yet more than 50% of the
It's
world's
yeah.
out of school is in Africa. We have child labor. In fact, there's serious work going on in Congo. I didn't know. It's my friend that told me from Congo. He said that, that people are dying on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I last week posted a friend from southern Cameroon. He came, he told me that even his people are still disappearing. And
Yeah.
yet, Africa was so occupied with what is happening in Gaza, we're so occupied with
Yeah.
what is happening in Ukraine, but people are actually far more are dying. So it's still that I don't know why it is that a lot worse things are happening just behind our house, and we're so concerned about what is happening far away. So it's probably because we've almost like elevated those countries to that heroic figure as the standard for what we should be like. So when we see things are not going on fine there, we are quick to want to correct it. Meanwhile, ours is even worse.
Our house is burning.
In my place, probably you've read it in one of Chinua Achebe's book, but in my place they say something. They say that the person whose house is on fire should not be chasing rats.
No, you should be trying to off fire.
House is on fire. I say, oh, this rat. I know rat is a nuisance, but listen, your house
That's
is on fire. So we need to figure out what is our priorities, and that comes down to the idea you shared about. We need to define. Look at where Africa is by 2050. More than 50% of the yearly input into the labor market will be coming from Africa. In fact, let me give you a shocking statistics. From 1950 to 2020, Asia contributed 62% to the global population. Africa contributed only 17%. But from 2020 to 2100, Africa is going to contribute 87% of the global population, while Asia is only contributing 9%. So
oh
over the
wow.
next 8 years, Africa is playing like almost double the role Asia played in terms of the human, but we're not even thinking about
Population.
harness this demographic dividend. How do we
How?
make sure that even if it is just focused on basic education, like you said, you talked about equipping our people to think, because if we have a world in which these technologies are so powerful and they could be tools for us to do more. So the question is, the focus of education should be on the person who handles the technology. How do you equip the person to understand values, ideas, mission of what to use the technology to achieve? And that could now fall also within the broader idea of what we want to achieve in Africa. So the young person now derives his own idea of what he should make of his life from that vision of a new Africa. And beyond, and there's so many advantages of that, because it will also help to create a sense of um, um, if within country you call it nationhood. I'm looking
Yes,
for
yes,
the
yes, yes.
word for
Yeah.
continent, like sense of belong, that we are chasing something as a continent. Right now, everybody's just going on its
Doing
own,
their
right?
own thing.
We have that shared vision for the continent. That's a better way to put it. Even within our schools, we begin to train people to begin to think within that broader concept, within that broader vision. What could my life become? How can I make my life add value to that?
To
And yet
this.
you equip them with critical thinking and whatever they need, that they begin to pursue it. In that way, AI becomes a tool to fast track the implementation of whatever ideals each and
We
individual.
have. Yes. It's supposed to be a thing that's led by our vision and not driven by the technology and the trends that are happening everywhere else.
So basically, you're saying we need to take back our position as the visionary, as
Yeah.
the people who actually who shape the future of the world. In this case, we're talking about our continent, Africa. We need to take it back, right? Figure out, yes, these tools could be powerful, but we need to figure a way to actually engage them to achieve our own vision. If
Yeah.
not, it will just be them achieving their vision using us.
We need to crack the code of what the Nigerian artists did, the Nigerian Afrobeat artists have managed to do. And then
Yeah.
we must then multiply that across all the other fields because what what I think worked for Afrobeat is that people could see themselves with it. They could feel pride. And that didn't
Mhm.
happen overnight. I remember when P Square and Two Faces started,
Of
we laughed at
course.
them in Cameroon. We were laughing like, aha,
They
what
were,
are these
I grew up in, I was in Jos. They started in Jos. They were actually, the school they went to actually was just behind my place. We were like, they
imagine?
were just playing from one club to another. We're like, these boys should go and they should go back to school and
You
get
see,
something together, right? And they actually kickstarted to a large extent. They played a huge role
they
because those
did.
guys,
They did.
up until
Yes.
20 or so, we are the main faces when
Yeah.
it comes
There
to
are
music.
there are people that laid a foundation for what Afrobeat has been able to achieve
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
but it took each of those people sort of having a vision for what they wanted to do for their
Mm,
lives. And sometimes when we think of talent and skills and purpose, people think about singing and acting and dancing. These are
mm,
talents, sure, but there's a
mm.
talent of being good at talking to people, good at thinking about
Absolutely.
things at an abstract
Yeah,
level. You're good with the
yeah,
technology, you're good at building. These are all
yeah.
talents and skills. And
Mm,
one of the things, as you were talking, that I felt I should say about the educational system in Africa specifically, I would even go as far as to say, if I remember my high school education coming here, is to shift the focus from consumption to a creative engagement, a creative activity with what this content is about. Because what we do for our students, and then we are surprised later that they can't invent beyond, is that we told them memorize. This is a and this is B. A plus
yeah.
B is equal to this, and you can't argue with it. If a student should even dare to produce something authentic, they mark down because you didn't follow the formula set by Smith and Carl in America, and this conversation is actually a lot more complex because when you really think about the practicalities of things, then you start to see the obstacles that are stacked.
Absolutely.
You're thinking
Absolutely.
about, okay, if I'm an academic and I say I want to push African knowledge production institutions, now there's a problem of high impact factor. Now you must consider who is even reading this African journal. I need to rather publish in the
Absolutely.
European. So there are all
Absolutely.
of these things, and and I think part of the reason we just prefer to look at Palestine and other people's problems is because they are difficult problems. There's no one size fit all solution. It will take and and I think what, like you were saying, that this language and communication should be an interdisciplinary, like something that we teach across the board. There are just those
Yeah.
things like language and communication, economics, philosophy,
Philosophy.
and
Yeah.
basic computer skills that I think everybody, regardless of whether you're a scientist or social science, should
Yeah.
learn.
It's so powerful what you're saying. And I have several thoughts around that. First is maybe let me step back a bit to the idea of we defining our goals as a society and how to solve it. During the Nigeria for I'm from the southeastern Nigeria. And so when the which of course the Biafran, which is another called the Biafra, we fought the Nigerian Civil War in the 1960s, and after the war we lost everything, everything. If you're an Igbo man, even if you were a billionaire before the war, the federal government only gave you £20 of your money. That's the money you kept in the Nigerian bank. Then the war broke out. You had to move to your region to fight the war. And after that, the government only gave you £20, no matter how many billions you had. So it was almost like a way of making sure that these people don't have resources to prosecute
To
another
grow,
war.
yes.
So we've lost everything, not to talk of millions we've lost. People are counting between 3 to 5 million people died, not to talk of properties. We've lost everything. So the question is, you are now at ground zero as a people. Who would
Where
help us?
to?
There's nobody to help us because the colonial masters were actually the ones supporting Nigeria, bearing in mind that the oil was in the Biafran land. But let's not go there.
Yeah,
But
because that's a whole other thing.
yeah, people had to really sit down and say, how do we move forward? And there's a saying in my place that the person who is rejected should not reject himself. And that is what Africa needs to do. You need to show that you don't want to reject yourself by taking your children seriously, by investing in the future of those millions of children that you have that should be an asset to your future. You see
Yeah.
how lead to child labor in Congo and they're being killed. You see them carrying heavy load. It's so pathetic. But anyway, coming back, our people decided, okay, what do we have? We have nothing, but we have what they call in my place the philosophy they started an organization called People's Club. People's Club is just a way to get the men together to help to build the region again. And their philosophy is this. The philosophy is this: onye ayara nwanne ya. Let me interpret it. Translation means onye ayara nwanne ya. It's translated into English is never leave. Literally it means never leave your brother behind. But basically they wanted to redefine what success is, because everybody's like on ground zero, that you are not successful except your brother. By your brother I don't mean your blood brother alone, I mean your extended family,
Yes.
your community succeeds.
Yes.
That was the engine room for the Igbo apprenticeship system, where if I have a business, I don't need to employ a secretary. I go and bring someone from the village to come and learn the business. In that process, is my secretary supporting me but learning the business. At the end, I give him some money to set up similar business, and he also gets somebody else. And that was why Igbos moved from having nothing in the 1960s to becoming the commercial life center of Nigeria today. They figured out what could work, and they found that it is our humanity. In South Africa, you call it Ubuntu that we have
Ubuntu. Yes.
it together and
Yes.
forge their own future. And they
Yes.
knew that they were in trading, right? And so they leveraged that with their own philosophy of Oyanya Rawanaya, which is more or less Ubuntu. You see others, you see life through others, right? Um, and that helped to redefine the future of the Igbos. It's impossible to imagine what these people lost in the war, that they could actually be
Who
a
they
tribe
are
to.
now. Yes.
Uh, Africa. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you because when we think about African logics like that, then you
Mm,
realize that Western measurements there. So we sometimes, when we think about colonialism and people are writing about decolonialism and whatnot, and then we're like, oh my God, can we just let this colonial story go? Africa is the
mm,
reason Africa is like this. Let's forget about what the colonial masters did, and so on and so forth. And I'm thinking, what we miss in that conversation is that colonialism wasn't a political campaign. It
mm,
wasn't an economic campaign. It was
mm,
a literally the spread of a civilization, of a way of life, right? It was a way of life. So that way of life is very much I think, therefore I am. I am man, master of everything else. These, if you look at every human institution that has followed that liberal thinking, that individualistic thinking, that
mm.
thread flows through everything. So the way the
Yeah.
economics is set up, the way the healthcare is set up, the way education is set up, is all this I think, therefore I am. I do what I can do to elevate myself, and everybody will
Mm,
have to do the same for themselves. That's a
mm,
very Eurocentric colonial thing that has been exported. So even though we
mm.
have the independence on paper, our politicians are there, the philosophies, the ideologies didn't go away. They're still very
Abs-
much there. And I feel like,
Absolutely.
yes, these ideologies are, I feel, counterintuitive to the African logic of how we do things. The whole
Okay.
idea of I am because we are, right?
Mm,
This relationship between the individual and the
mm.
community. If you go
Yeah.
in almost every indigenous
Yeah.
African culture, you will find different versions of this same mentality that
Absolutely.
I think I am
Absolutely.
because we are. It's not I think therefore I am. It's not an individual isolated engagement. We are
Absolutely.
here. So imagine
Absolutely.
that this was the logic of our politics. Imagine that this was the
Hmm.
logic of our economics, the logic
Hmm.
of our technology, the logic of our everything, of our education. Then our society will look quite different from a society that's driven by I think, therefore I am. So
Individualism.
you see, so this is why, even though we tend to say that, oh, we don't know what the social scientists are doing, they just sit there and write words that only them can understand.
Ah!
I think what we are missing is that ideas shape everything.
The
That fundamental idea is what is determining how we that's why no matter how much we try to reduce inequality from within an individualistic system, it just will not work. We
yes,
can
it
turn this thing around.
is because the framework it's not conducive for such a world,
It's
right?
not
The framework it's about maximizing value for myself.
self.
And because you will always find that people are unequal in terms of access to resources and opportunities. So there's no way if the aim is for me to maximize value for myself and I have the advantage, of course I'll keep accumulating it.
Of
Some
course.
yeah.
And
So
if
in
the
the framework,
resources are already scarce, then accumulating more for myself means that there isn't
absolutely,
enough for somebody else. Because the
absolutely.
economists like to come out and say, oh, this conversation about equality, resources are scarce, nothing is ever going to be equal. And I just want to ask, explain to me how we went through COVID. We all collectively managed to get poorer, but the billionaires managed to double, triple their wealth. If we are really
Well,
saying that this
yeah, because basically they have like because they have access to resources.
capital, yes,
Even in time of war or in time of pandemic, their aim is to maximum take exploit that whatever crisis that is going on to increase the value they have for themselves. That
yeah,
is it. But if we can upend that to have the mindset of, let's say, if there is a way we can embrace the Ubuntu mindset, the mindset of thinking like if we tie our individual survival to the group
to
survival,
the group.
our politicians will not be doing what they are doing.
They
You
can't.
can't just
They
all your
can't.
kids UK and everything. I don't even care. In fact, the food budget for feeding your family, just one family, is more than what you allocate to for the entire educational system. It's
It's
evil. But it's because
crazy.
it's about individual
It's
survival.
crazy. And that's why people will say, so you expect me to work so hard and accumulate my money and just come and distribute it to people? And I'm thinking that's not what anyone is asking. Because in
Hmm.
my opinion, I find that if you are thinking about I am because we are, I'm not an economist, I never ran a business, not sure how it operates over there. But I have a friend who runs a business, right? And how she models her business is that I can't enjoy all the benefits alone. So when she runs her business until she can up her prices, she also ups her employees' salaries. So that means she
Absolutely.
can't take as much home as she would want to by
Yeah.
keeping all of their salaries the same.
Yeah.
But that means that together, everybody gains a bit from this money that's coming in. Sure, that means
Absolutely.
she cannot jump the ladder in hoops, you know.
And in many cases, let me step in there because that is even though it seems altruistic, that is also a selfish in quote, it's a selfish act because by making sure you reward your employees more and they understand that they feel that they have a stake in this business, they give him more. And
Yes.
that is really important, especially in the context. I experienced similar things recently. Of course, with most of the talent that I work with, they are in Nigeria. So there's depreciation in terms of naira. So prices of goods has really skyrocketed.
Yes.
Well, we earn in dollars. So that means that we're able to have more. So the question is, how do we make sure that we also top up something to whatever we are paying them to? They feel that actually we are listening, right? In that way, they feel that we actually, even without them asking, they feel that okay, this place, this business actually thinks about my needs. It's
Yeah.
very important, and that is sustainable. That's very far more sustainable than the individualistic thinking. And if
Yes.
you remember what I said about the African system of thinking system, is a bit closer. It's closer to sustainability than this individualistic. Yeah,
Yeah.
because if your safety, if you understand that your safety is tied to the welfare of people around you, because if they are better off, they won't want to shoot you down, right? You create a better. It's both selfish. Yes, it seems altruistic, but it's
But
also
it
very,
comes back. And
yes, yeah.
that thing you just said now about this African way of thinking being
Mm,
closer to sustainability is something that people in ecological studies and those kinds of things have been looking at, really, to say that
mm,
how is it that every time the West comes here, they tell us that our way of life is backward. And then fast forward a few hundred years, and all of a sudden, now our way is the way. But now it's cool because it's coming from the West, right? Because now you have people who want to only
it's
kill
been
what they
refined.
eat.
It's
You
been
see?
refined.
Now refined, and now it's this new vogue thing that's happening and so cool and so new, but it's not new. It's not
It's
new
always,
because
yeah,
think about it. In our context, before this whole industrialization and whatnot, we had our systems where we ate what we needed. You can
absolutely.
argue that sure we didn't have fridges, but that also meant we had to eat what we killed. And then there was
Yeah,
no room to store things until they rot in the fridge, and then you keep buying more. So you see,
yeah.
we didn't just go into the village and chop down trees because there were some places that we figured were sacred, some things we couldn't pour chemicals into because we thought that river was sacred. So
Mm,
there was this respect for the environment, the respect for things. And like we say,
yeah,
no system is perfect. Of course, it has its ways in which it
yeah,
wasn't great. But
absolutely.
this that we're doing here is not sustainable, right? Because we have to
And the
think
world is
beyond.
realizing it already. They are realizing it that it's not sustainable, right? And if it's crazy because you have a situation where the inequality. Let me. It's shocking that just about 15 years ago, no single human being had more than 60 billion.
And
Now,
now,
richest men are having 200 billions.
yeah,
Like,
and they wrap it around the whole work hard, just keep working
yeah,
hard, wake
it's
up
not
and
about
chase your dreams.
absolutely. It's not about working out. In many ways, opportunity. It's almost it's of course they work hard, no doubt
Of
about that. But there are
course.
people that would work harder than them and even smarter than them and still not get that because
Think
there's a
about
road
our
and
grandmothers, Kenneth. These women were up before the crack of dawn. They were in the bushes planting, harvesting, and then they had to carry these heavy. If it was by
yeah,
hard work alone, of course,
absolutely,
there's
absolutely.
no way to really get there without
And
some
and
hard
they
work.
were smart. It's just that the environment and the resources they had because those people were able to figure out how to solve complex problems
Problems.
own situation, right? So
Yeah.
coming back, the point we're trying to make here, we're not saying Africa, of course, we need to be modernized, but we need to define what that
What
modernization
modernity? Yes.
is. And we
Yes.
need to make sure we integrate what is of importance to us, what is our essence as Africans, and make sure we integrate it into whatever developmental agenda we have
Yeah.
so that it helps to guide us as a philosophical foundation for whatever we are doing,
We're
right? Yes,
doing
but we make sure that we define and chart our own course.
path.
And if we do that and ensure that the university also imbibe that, whether within their curriculum and how they structure their education, because they are the engine room, not just university from basic education to
All the
university,
way.
they shape the human, right? If we are able to do that, in the next 10 and 50 years, Africa could actually be able to move the world. Because
Yeah.
in terms of numbers, I've given us the stats.
Yes.
From now, 2100 will be providing 87% of the global population. Like, we will
Imagine.
supply it. That's like
Imagine.
we have like an opportunity to define both cultures and everything.
Everything. But
Like,
the I don't know what it is about, you see, and the I just feel, I pray, I think I pray because at some point we must turn to God because
we're hopeless, right? God, please help us. We have something that, like, imagine what it is. Like, we have this, and the problem is that it is that same thing that we don't really care about. The youth, the young people God is giving us, and like, we don't even care. I started by telling us that we have 50% of the world's out of school children at this
So
continent.
imagine.
We have never educated the ones we have.
And then we are going
So
to populate the world. So
we need,
I
and
really
it's going to consume us if we don't educate them, equip them
yeah,
well. Plus, it's anarchy we are breeding
it
because we
is.
have all these
It
people
is.
who are hungry, who are drug addicts, who
It
are
is.
into whatever it is. They need to survive, and they start killing us, right? If we don't do
Yeah.
something. I think it's a call for us to, as a continent, to define what the future is for us, taking cognizance of our own values and the resources we have. We already
Yeah.
know what we have. We have human capital, which we haven't even developed. We also
Nope.
know what we have, that we have resources. But we need to now define how we could use this to achieve our objective without abandoning the values that make us Africans. I think
Africans, yes.
very important. We are going
Yes.
to have a part two of this
We
conversation.
should.
It's
This was so fun.
yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ajohche. It's really, I think as I was engaging with you, I was really learning a lot. And it was also helping me with my own thinking. Because this is why whatever we are talking about seems too broad and theoretical. This is actually a real thing. We know it's truth. We know because we see it manifest
Every
in our
day
daily life. It's not out of place. This is reality. Why are we not taking the bulls by the
by the
horn?
horn.
Why are we not doing it now?
We've
Um,
bought into the lie, unfortunately. That is why.
Maybe just give us your final word. What do you see for Africa? What Let me put it this way: what is your hope for Africa? Let me just put it that way.
My hope for Africa. I believe that laws and policies are important, and good politicians and economists and technology people are important. But I think, as I've been saying, what we need in Africa, more than just skilled people, is people with a sense of purpose. I think you mentioned this in one of the questions, and I just think it's a sense of purpose, but not purpose like how we know it as something out there that we have to go and chase, and we must just
Mm,
chase it until we find it. I think for me, purpose is an orientation, an
mm,
approach to life.
mm,
So that you're not sitting and waiting for a purpose to happen. You are making everything you do your purpose, if that makes
mm.
sense. So
Absolutely.
you see, if you say, I want to leave my imprint in Africa, I want to be a positive influence in the world around me. I want to make sure that everywhere I'm at, we think outside the box. We're trying to find new ways, innovative ways, not just what has been used elsewhere, but ways that are
Mm,
adapted to us, right? To make our lives, the life of the, not like the whole of Africa, the whole of South Africa, just here next to you. How can you
yeah.
use your skills, your knowledge, your personality, your everything that makes you a person? How can you infuse everything you do with this?
Mm,
With these dreams and these desires, so much so that it doesn't matter whether you're teaching, whether you're sweeping the street, whether you are walking, taking care of a patient, it doesn't matter. You will bring that attitude into everything that you do. And if for us that includes a vision for Africa, for so that we are not running around the world trying to get visas in other places that don't want us, then we can and part of the reason I have stayed so long without moving out of the continent was just part of my motivation to stay here, even if it's not Cameroon. Somehow, my presence on this continent, in this country, will do
mm,
something to impact the lives of the people around me. That's my goal. And I feel that if each and every one of us were to take on something like that in our separate, different disciplines, with our different sets of skills and strengths, our politicians will eventually have to come on board. I don't know, because they would have to, something would have to give, right? And if they
Mm.
don't, we will be able to, as a people, create for ourselves a world that works for us. um
Ah,
you know, it's as
wow.
simple as, why are you dropping the paper on the street? Because you think it's just me and it's just one paper, I'm just dropping it here and go.
Mm,
But imagine if
mm,
all the 1 million people were to walk past and drop
mm,
another piece of paper. It builds up into a whole trash can that now we must figure out how to clean, because you thought it was just one single paper or one bottle or one cup, chewing gum or whatever. So we think about it too much in big things when it really comes down to small everyday interactions. If you can go to America and know you can throw things just on the street as you walk? What is it that makes you just throw things on the street because we are in Douala or in Yaoundé? If we learn that appreciation of ourselves, our space, who we are, and treat
mm.
ourselves with respect, I think it will filter into whatever we do, and that can only boost the collective growth of Africa. And
Wow.
and to learn beyond your discipline, I think is very important. We stay in
Absolutely.
these boxes, and so we
Mm.
miss most of the picture. So if we can
Yeah.
find ways to collaborate across disciplines, across expertise, then we are looking at the
Mm.
picture more holistically than just from a linguistics perspective or an economics perspective. Bringing all these together, it's complicated, but I feel that's the only way we're going to make it forward. And that's my hope, that we grow more
Wow.
interdisciplinary and we gain pride in ourselves, in the small things, because then it builds up. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you.
Dr. Ajohche, wow. You exude so much passion for the continent. I could feel it. Very palpable. And I believe that you're going to play an important role in shaping the future of our continent. That there is so much to love about Africa. So much, so much. So before I came on this trip, I'm in the US now. Last week before I left, I went to this there's this place they sell African things in Cape Town. So they sell
Hmm.
like jewelry, all those is African stuff. I just look at the creativity, the people that are designing. I say, wow, there's so much to love about Africa. A continent of massive potential, passionate, creative people. So beautiful. Like I just
Right?
stood there. I started singing South African anthem. I was just there trans. It's not by saying God bless me. I'm like, why? Why can't we take advantage of the
Of
resources God has
this?
given? If I have to title this our discussion today, I'll call it a new vision for Africa.
Ah,
Interrogate a new vision for Africa. And we're going to have a part two. I think we need to delve more into that sense of we talked about the communal our communal philosophy, how we need to integrate that. Even in your closing, when you were talking about the fact that why would you drop a paper? If you understand that if you are dropping a paper, you are probably creating a problem for your grandchildren in the future because they may live in a world that is more destroyed. You understand that everything is interconnected.
connected.
It's not, yes, you are rushing somewhere, you need to catch the flight. You that does yes. So when you just focus on what you want to achieve at the time, you just selfish. Just but when you also remember, oh,
What are the
maybe my children
implications?
will suffer in
Yeah.
the future because of this. Maybe my brothers, maybe even some another African may suffer because of this. You factor in, you have so many things to consider for every action, not just the self-interestedness that has been so much the center of focus in the Western
World.
civilization.
Yeah.
Get back to our own Ubuntu, our own way of thinking that I am because we are. And like the Igbos say it, if you are moving fast, never leave your brother
Your
behind.
brother
If
behind.
you
Amen.
are successful until all your brethren are with you. Thank you so much,
Amen.
Josiah Joshi, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for having me. I had fun.